Are we ready to go? Yes. All right. So thank you and welcome for being here as part of the lecture series. This is the Visiting Artist Lecture Series is sponsored by the Regional Arts Commission, so we want to thank them for their contribution and bringing all of our speakers here. I want to thank my colleague Lindsay for doing an excellent job in putting all this together and organizing it. It's easy for me. All I have to do is stand up and say, Lindsay did all the work. Here's my friend. But I have the great honor of introducing Rian Kerrane, originally from Galway. Rian and I have known each other for quite some time now. We both serve on the board of the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance together. Rian works in all kinds of different media through installation, performance, object making, and really integrates, presents a sort of unified way of thinking about materials and space and process. What do we need to know? She received her BA in Fine Arts from Ulster University in Belfast, her MFA from University of Louisiana. Rian is currently full professor at the University of Colorado in Denver, where she comes to us from right now. She is currently installing a show at the Sheldon, which we're very excited about. There's Paula. So I'm not going to talk any more than that. If I missed anything, Rian, I'm sorry. But Rian Kerrane, y'all.
Hi. Thanks, Noah.
You're welcome.
And thanks, Webster and Sheldon. It's really nice to be back in this part of the world. I was here, was that a year and a half ago?
Yeah, November.
November, we did the Pearl Snaps exhibition in your galleries. I don't know if you folks saw that. And, you know, the beauty of just sort of making your work and going around and visiting with friends who bring you in places or colleagues is that, you know, Paula came by and saw the show and went, oh, maybe Rian would like to do a show at the Sheldon. So sort of that's word of mouth and networking. And I can't advocate enough for just, you know, getting your work out there in public as much as you can. Those opportunities, yay. So I'm going to touch my computer. And I'm going to go back one. No? Let's try the other direction. So, no. Okay. I'm in charge of this computer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Noah. It is interesting to come from another continent and sort of grow up in the U.S., as it were. I'm over 30 years in the U.S., but that's more than half my life without going into too much detail. I practice both in Ireland and in the US, and so I'm just going to sort of spill the beans looking at images. I've sort of focused my work series that I'm showing you today on work that is similar in process and media and sort of output that is going to be at the Sheldon, which is a sort of wallpaper series that I sort of term it. And this piece here is in Denver. It's a public artwork, and yet it's very sort of temporal materials, less traditional outdoor material. You've got PVC pipe that's been heat bent, you know, with warm sand heated to 200 degrees and then dry in a saucepan, and then poured inside the PVC pipe and allowed to sit for a minute. So the whole pipe heats uniformly, and then you can sort of put it on a jig and bend it, and it doesn't kink. You know, so that's a lot of labor. And I had a past student do that for me. Isn't that great? But again, it's that sort of networking. For Tiffany, it was sort of a first public art piece. She was paid, and I often end up having a teamwork component, if I can afford it, with works as well. You know, I'm 30 years making sculpture, and most of it I'm making by hand. But I'm also I have a fabricator working on a piece right now too in Denver, so I'm going to show you that. So very eclectic range of materials and scale. But I'm emulating a sort of Victorian wallpaper here. I'm very enamored with William Morris wallpapers and the arts and crafts movement. I was a tour guide in Ireland as an art student in my summers in Donegal, and at the Glebe House, the British Portrait Painters Art Collection, and he had some William Morris wallpaper in his little study cove, and it was just fabulous, like a cave, dark, blackberry piece. bramble piece. So looking at repeat pattern, looking at systematic organization. I've got cast aluminum on the walls. It's all bolted to this brick wall. And the tops of the sort of Greek columns, that's actually gym rope. You know, the stuff that you do this with, or you see pictures of people doing that? You know, and I needed a rope to take a mold from, and I'm driving down the road and I saw, there's a gym rope right there, and I pick it up, right? So I pick up a lot of detritus all the time, and when I need something, it's interesting that you can just find it because it's right there. Sometimes that happens a lot, and it's maybe more about keying in and a little bit of awareness, but my interest in materials is often, yes, the PVC pipe is from Home Depot, unfortunately, but you know, I'm shopping, but I'm also upcycling and recycling a lot. Plastic railroad tracks up there, and that's the originals, or similar to the originals that you'll see in cast iron at the Sheldon, actually. But plastic lasts a long time outside. And then the stencils that you're seeing on the wall there are spray paint stencils, mimicking a lot of the flora that you see in wallpapers. So playing off wallpaper pattern. But it was really nice to see this piece outdoors. And we took a week or so installing. That's just from the other view, from the street side. Sort of playing off the Victorian potted plant and the dark room, the sort of stage set where you take your portraits. And then there's a security camera in the alley, so we just nabbed the footage from that. And this is not bang for you. Okay, hold on. Here we go. So that is just from the alley. This is us installing, and it was like, their security footage was in some very strange files that were very hard to make compatible to a regular computer, but we just sort of figured it out, and we're seeing sunrise and the sun pass over this alley. And this is part of a series of artworks that went on in downtown Denver that called the Between Us project. And these alleyways were given to artists to create works. Crime statistics dropped in the alleyways with art, which is just an interesting aside, but it's great for fundraising, you know, to be able to quote things like that, right? Yeah. I think it's interesting how much labor goes in, that might have been some of my stencils or something called, how much labor goes into your work, right? It's a construction site for a long time, and then it's something people look at and they don't even consider the amount of effort or work sometimes that goes into your work. You know, that's your private knowledge. But maybe process is part of your work, and maybe you like people to think about that, but it's not necessarily what I'm asking people to think about. We could watch this for another minute, but I think I'll pause it and go see my... This piece, Audubon drawing room, so sort of circa 1800s was the title. It's got cast iron and cast bronze and cast aluminum. It's got steel, it's got pinhole photos, lace, paint. And a lot of these works are temporary, right? This doesn't exist except for the wall space in the gallery. So these are the sort of site-specific installations. It depends on what a gallery would like, where somewhere would like me to place work. But again, I love how it's become more apparent to me, and I sort of started with wallpapers thinking about the yellow wallpaper, and that book by Charlotte Perkins Gilman is often used in feminist women's studies, etc., about mental health, and the protagonist being sort of the husband, who's the doctor, so it was about patriarchy and stuff. So I'd seen a black and white film of this, or a very early film of this, and it just stuck with me, this woman like going a little crazy in her isolated bedroom and ending up seeing the wallpaper moving and sort of pulling the wallpaper down, you know. And so I keep thinking about wallpaper as a way of that, like historically in homes longer than several families, layered over, etc., but it absorbs a lot of our human domestic energies, I think. It's witness to a lot, and I sort of see it in that emotional context wallpaper. but I also see it now more too as how we like to control nature. And as humans, our relationship to nature is very problematic. At this point, a lot of us would agree that our environment and our sort of situation on the planet is quite dire, and I like how we think we have a bond with nature, but it's really a disconnect, and we forcefully organize it in patterns, and we plant our gardens, and we put in our et ceteras, et ceteras. I'm thinking about fertilizers, I'm thinking about our depleting resources and stuff. So in a way it becomes a critique a little bit on climate, and connected more now to my interest in recycling and upcycling as well. I'm just jumping back here about 15 or 16 years. These are my first swatches of wallpaper, and I can name it because I was installing this show when my daughter was 3 months old, and I thought I'd be fine. Like a half a year earlier, I said, yeah, she'll be 3 months, I'll be fine. I think I got to the gallery and had to turn around and go straight back home and things like that. But it's a mixture of vintage wallpapers and then cast forms. These are cast iron and cast bronze, repositioned with a car vinyl or old school vinyl and thrifted frames. And I might have a few other shots from that show, but and this is a piece from North Carolina that was boy wallpaper, girl wallpaper, again just exploring a variety of stenciled color on the wall and graphite drawings and physical objects, playing with a sense of game or puzzle with perspective. What should normally be on the vertical is on the horizontal and vice versa. Back to that show where my daughter was 3 months old, she's 16 now, and these were supposed to be all cast in metal, but they're actually cast in wax, and I decided to show the cast wax. It's not a problem, wax is a medium, but for me it was, you set these goals, and sometimes you don't quite reach the exact goal, but you realize it's a liberation, and since then I've shown wax forms in galleries on purpose. If I like the color of the wax, then maybe why make it into another material? I think it's good to question yourself sometimes. So I do a lot of replication. I'm very interested in multiples, and printmaking was a minor when I was in grad school in New Orleans. And so that sort of fascination with numbers and sense of pattern that is a human trait. Being blown away with the number of stars in the sky that you can see at night, for example, or a crowd scene, or it becomes a validation or a reiteration of the singular, I think, in a nice way. And so, anyway, this piece, it's stenciled, rope. There's a soundtrack. The two cast horses are doing the sort of the Barbie clock. It's actually the recording from the Barbie doll horse. And then the neigh sound, which everybody does a very different neigh. I haven't got you all to do your neighs right now. But so that's housed under that piano lid cover, and the rope is endless. Actually, this is when I was getting divorced, or just gotten divorced. I was making this piece. So the big rope, but I was invited to do a show in Austria, and I was telling Paula about this. I photographed this piece. And I reproduced the image on adhesive vinyl to scale. So, that might be 15 feet by something. And I just rolled that up and I brought it on the airplane. And I went through customs with a rope around it, like I could carry it. And nobody questioned me. I saw them pointing and laughing. And, Irish customs don't want to know stuff. Just, like, look at her. Because if you try and ship art, it can be really problematic. Like with Mexico and in Germany, I've had catalogs just sent to me since November that have not arrived. It's just a little package, and it's not even art, but it's complex. It's gotten more complex lately, in the last 20 years or so. But it was really interesting to see. I made something, I'm mimicking wallpaper that's normally flat, dimensional for the show, and then I flattened it and brought it to a show and showed it flat. So, the adhesive vinyl comes down the wall and goes out onto the floor to be a pile of rope that's flat. You know, and that was a sort of turning point in, I mean, I'd like to play with taking images of my work and then representing it. And it's sort of like Faith Ringgold doing her quilt paintings where she could roll them up, and it was just sort of an economical way to get her paintings around, and it sort of revolutionized at the time that idea and approach of getting your work economically somewhere, which if you're a sculptor, it's a lot to drive across the country. I mean, I drove from Denver, it's 2 days. It's an expense, it's, you know, it's a commitment, time, and we used to do that a lot more. It was more economical too, you know, I think. These are dried oranges, and it smells good, and it's cast plaster little forms. So the original is the gold one, and it's from a thrift store. And so I'm often looking for forms in our museums of curiosities, thrift stores, and that are already cast, that are from our domestic realm, you know, the decor from homes, the sort of human control of nature and placing it, the artifice of it, or the mimicry in our homes in a controlled way. Yeah, so just playing off motifs and wallpaper patterns, and this one's for Parker. Is Parker here? Because she's doing a little Art Deco-y stuff. Yeah. Again, cast aluminum, and some of them, these are the originals. And that's it. These are vintage sort of vinyl colors on the wall. And then this is the yellow wallpaper piece that I was invited to do a piece for a show called Artist Footprints. And I think I vaguely knew the French woman who curated the show, but she actually found my work on an artist register. And I think it's important to get your work out there on registers. Like sometimes galleries have them. Call for Entry has it. It's called Cafe, and that runs often out of Denver. But I think there's other. It's sort of national, and you can have a portfolio on there. And then artists that are curating shows will look through with keywords and try and find artists sometimes for shows. That's how I got invited to be in this show. So getting your work out there. I emphasize that a lot now because I have students and I do teach, and it's an undergrad program, but a lot of the time they're not as interested, it seems, in the effort of putting their work up somewhere. The social media, being online and being branded as an artist, is maybe more appealing. And I think you're responsible for both, but if you're thinking about branding on Instagram, etc., it's only artists that are looking at Instagram, it's not curators. And you're not necessarily, like seeing work in the flesh it blows your mind. I didn't have much respect for Saul LeWitt. His work really doesn't reproduce well in books, but when I saw it in person, I was blown away. All his drawings in the Beacon place there, for example. And then, you know, I was in Florence, and it's like, nah, it's okay, I don't need to go see the David, you know, there's going to be a line. But my sister, I'm sorry, snob, right? I also have not been to Burning Man. I cast iron. But I think we trip ourselves up sometimes, right? And just when you get a chance to see work in the flesh, I did go see it, and I was blown away, right? And there is magic in the real thing, so just enjoy that, right? And get that out there. Anyway, this is all my artist footprint. This is turmeric and paprika and apple slices and pasta and poppy seeds on the wall. And, you know, just playing with stencil and pattern. And again, it gets washed off the wall, which is sort of nice. Scrubbed off the wall afterwards. And it's sort of interesting to see the apple dry. So it's just, they're not glued on, really. They're really just sort of the dampness of the fruit or the slightly wet pasta. And it's going to sort of stay on the wall. So I love investigating materials, and I like the play that comes with making. Sometimes I have a plan from the beginning and I just make like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'd never done that before. I did a small test on a swatch of board to try out, but then this was the real tryout, you know, so that's another thing about having a space and a deadline. If you don't put your work out there, you don't make your work. You know, sometimes it's important to think about that. Here's an example of a piece that you'll see a version of at the Sheldon if you come by the reception on Friday. It's a photograph of a sculpture of mine, right? And then the sculpture was made. And you can see, actually, I've included this for you, Paula. There's the pieces in the back. I don't have a good, I didn't have a close-up image of it, but that blue sphere and white sphere are works of mine, and they go way back to my grad school experience in New Orleans. And it's like, I don't necessarily sell my work a lot. It's sort of big. It's industrial looking. I might get, commissions or invited to do shows or get a public art commission here or there, but I'm really lucky to be in academia and have a job that is also at a research institution where 40% of my job description is to exhibit and make work. 40% is teaching and 20% is service. That's sort of the loose breakdown. So if you can find yourself in positions that you get to talk about art all the time and get paid for it, that's brilliant, right? Enjoy it. I'm pretty lucky. That's how I feel. But anyway, back to, again, photographing your work and reproducing it to scale and then sticking it to a wall. But then you have ladies' handbag straps all linked together to a cast iron boat. So it's just a little sort of submersible bathysphere as a term, but with a cast bronze porthole on it and reproduced here. When I first came to this country 30-something years ago, as an immigrant, I was very smitten with submarines. I sort of finished up my undergrad in Belfast, Northern Ireland, starting to look at periscopes as an image in my work, and telescopes, making them out of lead and stitched together, and then just sort of went whole hog into the rest of the periscope, into the submersible part. When I came over here in grad school, I was blown away with the industrial access to equipment and scrap yards, and I was in Louisiana, and you could go and see a mound of serviette dispensers. It's like, what is that? Oh my God, that's a napkin dispenser. In mass, again, so it's this sort of intrigue with, whoa, materiality. And in Europe, you have a very different sensibility culturally. There's different ways of tradition, and you're defined a little bit more. So it's harder to be as entrepreneurial as we see the US, and especially when it comes to owning tools. Like many of you grew up, there were welders in your uncle's garage or your auntie's garage or whatever, in Ireland, I know 2 people with welders in my whole town, and their businesses. So it's that reach. And so I had I loved grad school, but I did make a lot of steel fabricated sculpture, but looking at the submersible or the submarine as a sort of fortified safe space to look out periscope. If you think about a young person in a new country for the first time 30-something years ago, I sort of saw them as self-portraits in a way, these submersibles with 20-foot periscopes. This is up in Denver right now. I'm closing a show called Housekeeping. You're all invited, but it goes down on the 8th. But it was really nice to do a show in Denver in a space I knew really well, and I really curated something that made sense for the space for me and my work. That's me with my granny and granddad and my siblings. I think this is my whole family, which is, no, maybe not. I'm from a family of 7, and this is my grandfather's farm where my dad was born. But anyway, Rian Kerrane, that's her back there, made this on the right? So you're looking at butterfly and a plant, right? But it's like, as a retired older lady in a rural part of Ireland, she would go to a lot of classes, and she would learn how to make leather purses or cushions, or and so at one point she obviously did this sort of string art on velvet. I photographed this summer because I was already thinking about the Sheldon and where I was going to go with a drop of metal that I'm using in a sort of similar, in a wallpaper piece that I'll show you in a minute. But anyway, I grew up looking at that over the fireplace for decades. And I went home, and it hasn't been on the walls in our house in a long time, but my mother was able to fish it out, and I took a photo. So just thinking about the lineage of when you make things and where they might originate. I think a lot of my work has threads that weave in and out of each other. A lot of what I do can be responsive to materials, but a lot of subconscious things are happening, and they reveal themselves the more you're making your work, which is really a nice thing to look forward to as you keep making. These are just some clips from the work that's going on at Sheldon, and I'm using VHS tape with nails to sort of mimic the string art. And what I researched with string art, it was actually, it sort of can be traced back and originates with a woman, a mathematician living in Cork in Ireland. Her name was Liza Boole, and her husband was a mathematician at the university there. Both were self-taught mathematicians, and both were British, but they were residing in Cork in Ireland at the time. And she crafted this as a way to teach children geometry. So it was devised as a way to explain math. And anyway, I'm using it with a sort of retro way of recording the technology, with little details in this wallpaper that's down at the Sheldon, which is called Postcard from St. Louis. And the curiosity with having, that's a speaker casing on the wall. There's 3 casings that I'm going to house a little soundtrack with. And the Sheldon is going through a lot of renovations, but it is concert hall and also galleries. And the galleries are housed in a parking deck, and a lot of that was built in the 20s. And so I'm sort of mimicking a little of that era with Art Deco sensibilities, and then looking at audio from that time. And then other entertainment components that are the VHS, or just a nice way to think about emphasizing the palmetto palm and that sort of focus on codified nature that you see in Art Deco. But curiously, I have this sticker on one of the speakers, and it's from St. Louis, and I didn't know that until I hung it here. And I've had these for 30 years. They've been in a show in Cleveland is where they first got used, and I've used them a couple of times since. But I looked up the company. This is from their 1995 catalog, Communication Products Fast. And they made the metal housing for security equipment and stuff. So anyway, I just thought you'd like to know that. Sort of rewarding in our search for things, sometimes where we end up. I don't know what I was doing in this piece, but this is all audio tape. And that's a lot of audio tape. I did it's like such thin line. It's really hard to photograph linear components if you're documenting your work. You know, they just sort of disappear. But anyway, there was a soundtrack for knitting in here, and I have some sections of knit audio tape. I have cake mixers running every now and again on motion sensors when the viewer comes in and starts going, yeah, and so there's this sort of environment of domestic chaos happening in here, and it was a sort of rounded room space, so I'm surrounding people with it. And so I'm just thinking about the knitting I do, or the crafts that I do in my work, and this is a piece that goes way back to maybe 2012. Noah, you've seen the folding deck chair. That's cast iron, and it does fold and collapse, and then the seat is knit hair, and it's synthetic hair, but it's the same color as my other granny's hair, you know. So just thinking of it's Nancy's deck chair, actually, is the title of that piece. But in my interest in knitting, I sometimes turn to things like seaweed, right? I'm in Ireland. I bring students to Ireland on a study abroad program every 2 summers, and it's every odd year. So this year I'm going in July. And we go out to the Iron Islands for a couple of nights. And so it's very much focused on site specificity and responding to the environment. And we vary the environments. We go to beaches, we go to the top of a mountain. We're at the Byrne College of Art, which is a host institution there. So that's where I first knit my first audio tape. And this is my own cassettes from when I was a teenager. And I brought them all back to the States. I still have them all. They're all mixed tapes. The sound quality is pretty interesting. And what was nice, when I was in Ireland, I was doing a lot of knitting, knowing I was going to do that previous show. And people volunteered to help. So I would give people a cassette tape and some knitting needles, and they'd send me a parcel with the cassette tape knitted. And you know, there's something nice about that involvement in the work too. So that's a complete song, or series of songs there. Might have been a blank. I might not have wanted to risk one of my originals. But you know, just being in Ireland, this is Hazel Rock, another area. It's very ancient space. Same part of the west coast of Ireland. And so I found that photography ends up being relevant when you're teaching a site-specific course. You're often in the middle of nowhere with just yourself, and so there's a formative bent to the work often as well, where you end up with the camera maybe turning on yourself because you're doing something, right? And so some of the students end up doing performance art. In fact, I've done performance art there too. Not because it's part of the program, but it's a natural step that happens. And then this is one of the first railroads I explored, and that's just stenciled onto a beach there in County Clare. And then on the right, you're seeing Nancy's deck chair again, and cast heads. Again, these are shorelines in Ireland that are replicating shorelines in Ireland, where we used to cross a railroad track coming out of Galway to go down to the beach at Ballymonaghan all the time growing up. And so these sort of airy things keep repeating in my head. And then I see the railroad as relevant for, you know, that sense of journeying and traveling and being in another country, which this is still another country, or maybe Ireland's the other country, but I'm always going over and back, and there's these cyclic sort of journeys happening for me annually for 30 years, right? So it ends up being important. But I also think of the circle motif or idea that as species, as humans, we tend to repeat ourselves too, and we're finding that we're reverting to, you know, the Dark Ages or wherever again. But you know, just I think whose work was I looking at today? The first person.
Faith.
Who?
Faith.
Faith. Is she here?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think the power of her image of her father and all that background imagery, she doesn't need anything else with it, right? It's like it's this hero, the complexity of one individual and the amount of people they affect. And then that we, each person here in this room, is doing something similar. Like we have a huge individual community that overlaps or whatever, but it's like this cycle of life that we're living, and the importance of ourselves to ourselves, and the fact that there's just so many of us and we've been doing it for so long. It's just crazy. In Ireland, we all think about Ireland as a green sort of rural scape and idyllic. I mean, it's the most farmed, I'm nearly cursed, most farmed island. It's 5,000 years of farming, and that's a lot of people, and it's a tiny island, you know, so it's not wild, it's actually quite our relationship, our husbandry of land and landscape. It's layered there in an interesting way that you absorb. And this image is for Cara. It's hairbrushes. She's got a beautiful piece in her show at the Sheldon. So this is one of the other artists at the Sheldon opening on Saturday. So come see her work. A beautiful hairbrush piece. But I was picking up. These were actually from, you know, fridge railings, probably like thrown into the sea. The sea. We go to a couple of different beaches in Ireland with the course, and I make work while I'm there for that month. It's like a residency in a way for all of us. We have 24-hour access to a studio space, and so I was picking up old, rusted, strange stuff that the sea washes up different things on different beaches. I love its like filtering mechanism based on currents. And actually, from Florida, you get the Gulf Stream coming up along the west coast of Ireland, and that makes the temperature a little warmer on that side for swimming. It's freezing there anyway, but you know, it's a little warmer. It's baptismal, and each time. Yes, an artist from USL in Lafayette set off a boat in the Gulf Stream about 50 miles off the coast of Florida to catch the stream. It ended up in Ireland. He had every language on it. He had it was metal floating, but it also was filled with styrofoam, so it wouldn't sink when people took hot shots at it or whatever. You know? But it ended up in Ireland. So he got a phone call from some little boy. Like, your boat ended up here. And he said, oh, where is it? Oh, it's out on the turf pile. You know, so I don't know if he ever tracked it down or anything, but it made it to land. And it's sort of interesting how the ocean does that. So the wood and the metal are both from shore, and it's just a sort of immediate piece. This is the Byrne College of Art again, and we don't really exhibit. We have a sort of open studio where we finish our program, and you don't bring things home. You sort of, it's like scatters back. I might speed up a little. These are corn on wood houses, and I made them from leftover material that I had been gifted from a collaborative show with an ex-husband. I got all the detritus from our collaborative work over a decade. He got mostly the tools and the trailers. And so I had this pile about this high of corn panels from a show we've done. And I decided instead of trashing it that I would own it a little bit to more ceremonially lose it. So I fabricated the houses and then showed them, and then I burned them and in an iron pour as a sort of performative piece. But one of them accidentally didn't get burned. It was left in a box and never put out on that day, so I was sort of haunted by the house. But in 2017, I made a mold of it, and in this past year, I actually started casting them in iron, and so this is just an overview of the show in Denver at the moment, and we see 3 iron houses on pillars there, looking down from the mezzanine level of the gallery. So they're still around. And I mean, to me, this is an Irish house. This is what a kid would draw when they draw a house when you're growing up in Ireland, but it's not necessarily 50s ranch style or US style of house. It's not maybe as culturally identified. If you want to think birdhouse, you're welcome. Right? But, and yeah, just if you look at the back wall there, I want to talk to you about valuing materials just in the set of 9 and 4 tables, 13 glass panels. There's 100 items on those tables and a ladder, and you can, a gallery, you can take things. They're all labeled. The image on the right, I did this twice. It's up right now in Denver, and in 2016 I did it in Las Vegas, New Mexico, at the university there. And it's different glass panels, and it was a fabricated steel structure. The glass panels were all given to me. I inherited a studio, and the artist didn't want to move them. Said, do you want those? And I said, sure, yeah. But it took a long time. I figured out how to use them, and I used the tower on the right. It was too tall for people to get to the top, but they could see the things. And there's 100 items on those shelves too. And they're all tagged and labeled. And it's detritus. It's the contents of my drawers is the title. And just having the ability to peruse stuff as a cabinet of curiosities, again, reference, and then people were able to explain what things were to me, like they're parts of things. Sometimes I didn't know what I had, but I was responding to it enough to keep it. And I'd done a couple of different studio moves, so this stuff was not, I hadn't been able to throw it away. And that's actually when the piece originated, when I did have to leave a studio. And so I collect what people take. They have to write as a trade why they're taking something, what they value it for. And you know, quite a few objects were taken from this show, but the current show, there's only about 6, 7 things left out of the 100. And I'm very sorry for the things that are left, but that'll give me something more to write about, right? But and so
there's something better I could have done.
yeah, these are still with me. But I'm looking forward to thinking about, you know, each thing is numbered one to, you know, what people have written, and so it becomes a sort of publication. We're going to be on sabbatical in the fall. I'm going to pull this together. I've been meaning to pull it together for a while, so from the first show, but no, it's a couple of things, so I'm excited. I couldn't resist these mock buckets when I saw them. It's like, you seriously have these for sale? I did buy them. But yeah, just thinking about our housekeeping is the name of the show in Denver, and so the mops are something I cast often-ish. I've done a series of those over time, but you know, I'm really excited about the fuel gauge from your car. Suddenly here it's just cut out as sheet steel. So this piece I'm probably going to explore further. I just wanted to say thanks, Arlo. You've been great. Couldn't have done it without you. Oh, Michaela! So there's a railroad and things to see down at the Sheldon. And I read this lately. It's a really good book. And my daughter got it for me, and I thought it was all short stories. And I was like, I had to put it down because they were all really good, but I hate when short stories just leave you. Right? My husband said, no, Rian, it's a novel. Could you get back to it? Started at the beginning again. But it's a beautiful book, so I recommend that. Our relationship to the planet. And this is a public art piece that is being built. And it's interesting to put yourself as a sculptor or an artist in conjunction with a commission and a public art, which has a lot of weigh-in from engineers, a lot of weigh-in from a lot of people weighing in on how things end up looking visually. But what I wanted to point out in this is that I'm upcycling H&M storage of clothing racks. So the circles are where the clothes hung and it spins. And the stars that you're seeing are the legs, 5-pointed legs on the bottom. And it's all stainless steel and it was really well made. And I do have photographic images that be in the spinning wheels, and it's for the city of Aurora, which has a 5-pointed star on its city seal. So the legs of the furniture are now 5-pointed stars that represent business and school and whatever, you know. So I was able to write my narrative or story around. So if you keep something long enough, you figure out how to use it. That is the main point. And this is it being fabricated in shop, and there's an example of 2 of the images. These are for business, I think, you know, the theater and the trams. So there'll be 5 sets of 2 in some century. And that's a close-up of one of the pieces in the housekeeping show. The 3-ring binders I scavenged from the dumpster at school, and that was like, yes, now I know what I'm going to do for the show, right? This is the alphabet. There's like A to Z, and people can spell a word of the day, which I'm photographing. Again, another exchange with the community. So at the end of the day, if the word hasn't been changed by a visitor, the gallery attendant will do it, and it's photographed. So it's a narrative, a poem, that I'll also publish somehow. So, and these are all done with brands that I burned onto paper. They're prints, basically, the lettering. Oh, Marley and Sam, yay. Thank you. And, you know, I've used the oranges again, but this time, this was a second iteration of that, and this was in Fort Hayes some years ago. But I haven't seen this piece since then. It's packed in my studio, right? And it's like, I like to look at it sometimes, so I bring out a photograph because it's easier. So it's a steel frame, wood panels, vintage wallpaper, and it's cast iron on there. Oh yeah, in this case, they're not plaster anymore. I did cast them. So, you know, you can cast in different materials. It doesn't always have to be the traditional material. You can cast in chocolate and jello, which are, oh, the Sheldon. I am so excited to be setting up work there. It's really nice to have space to play with, and I'm loving it. So I hope you can come down to the opening on Friday at 5, 6? 6 to 9. Come schmooze. Yeah, downtown. Where can people park?
That's a question.
Yeah, free parking. I don't know anyone in town except here. I'm going to be really lonely if you don't come. Noah's not coming. Allison's out of town. So that's it for me, and I'm going to take questions in a minute, but I do have this. Did you want to show this yet?
You can show it. Yeah.
This?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
QR code,
Yeah,
give
this will-
feedback.
Yeah,
Oh.
feedback that will help our lecture programming.
Yeah. So thank you for letting me ramble and just be inspired by whatever I was showing to take like a couple of different directions. I'm sure I'm repeating myself in some regards, little reiteration, but I really love people. Challenge me, please. Ask some questions.
Extra credit to any of my students that ask a question.
So mean. We got two
I'll
questions.
give you extra.
Oh, no, one question.
No, I'm just interested in, because like Joe was talking about yourself before, I'm just interested in kind of like your performative work and stuff.
Yeah.
I was really interested in what you did with the houses.
Oh, that iron piece,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just interested in like your performance.
but with metal.
Just
Yeah.
like how you approach it. and
Yeah.
stuff and whatnot.
You know, I helped. I love performance art and artists and artwork, but I actually don't necessarily feel fully comfortable in doing live performance. But I did start Performance Art Week at our school 15 years ago, and I make all my students do it. And we have a really vibrant Performance Art Week now in the spring, and it's coming up in April. And you could submit a piece for projection on a clock tower there, or you could come in person and do live performance if you want to do it.
I'd love to hear more
Yeah.
about that.
So it's called PAW, and it's PAW 13 because we had a little hiccup around the pandemic. But the performance work that I do tends to be, I'll film myself doing something, and it's not in front of an audience, but I'm editing, I'm sort of crafting how something might be experienced through the lens, mostly. I have a performance piece that I really love doing in Ireland, and I only have one shitty Holga photograph of the whole thing. But you know, I made a drawing that included that, you know, so I made a sort of work out of it. But I'm always taking images, photographs, video, and sometimes I'm subject to that in some of the footage. Maybe branding. I projected on the clock tower. I filmed myself branding paper, for example. So it's the power of video for me too that I like. Yeah.
Rian, there's something about like this idea of performance that I've always associated with you, and the things that you present are like displaced moments in time, and you don't necessarily have to be there for the performance when you're doing it, but it's like another way of you creating a collection. Do you see it that way? Is it important for you to like not be present and to show the residue in the same way that you think about like showing wallpaper from something that you're not?
I think you're in that realm of where I like, it's almost like I've just stepped away sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of domestic familiarity in stuff that I'm showing, and to me that's an entrance for the viewer. It's like familiar enough to approach, and then you realize, oh, I'm in a gallery and I'm supposed to, it's elevated somehow, right, to another point, echelon for consideration or association. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of the craft and labor too in there.
And that labor is like
real.
invisible in the object in a way. It's present,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
like the doing of it is
Yeah,
invisible.
yeah. And actually, the piece that is being fabricated in that shop, that's where I got all the drops that I meant to mention that I'm using right now. It's another artist's work, actually. You know, their work is gone. These are the drops from the fabricator, and it's like, do you want those? Yeah, okay. And they're going to be used, you know, so there's a constant narrative that way too with who had something and passing that on, human presence, I think, in the work. Yeah, 3. Fight over it.
Rochambeau?
I also like to upcycle with as much as I can. Like, it's kind of my main jam is spending as little money as I can and reusing whatever is already presented. But sometimes that idea kind of grows and makes it hard to finish a piece because I'm not willing to buy something, if that makes sense.
Ah.
So I wonder how you kind of balance that in your work, like this value and like this value that you have upcycling along with like just the reality that sometimes you have to buy things, you know, to make things, and how you kind of.
Yeah, it depends how rigid you want to be with yourself as like, this is my my mantra or something. But even if I'm upcycling, sometimes I'm going the hard way around something. I'm not working necessarily smart. I'm so rather intuitive with my materials that I have to make to figure things out. And sometimes I make what I could have bought on eBay pretty economically and really liked, but I make something really remarkably well and it's fucking heavy. You know, and I don't know. I it's important to me that I make it because that's my resolving design, resolving visuals. I'm also interested in economy, and I hate waste. I'm from the 70s in Ireland, an impoverished country in Western Europe. We had nothing at the founder of 7. But I think you do need to spend on your money, your work. I think you need to believe in yourself and invest. And maybe what you see as a hurdle isn't a hurdle either. I said that to someone today. Just go around enough. Don't bother about going home. So often there's in-house grants to apply for little things. Do it. Not enough people apply. You know, and you'd be surprised.
So, what about the process of doing cast iron stuff appeals to you? Is it like the whole thing? Because like for me, I really enjoyed like all the mold making process, but anything beyond that kind of just.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
I like the actual.
Yeah, I know that you like the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I hate
Yeah. It's funny, now that you've cast iron, or if you ever cast iron, you're going to be part of a subculture and a community that there's no escape from. Iron dominates your life. Yeah. Like I brought iron casting to my institution in 2005. I never really studied iron with anyone. I was a caster, but I was, your traditional bronze, aluminum, or centrifugal sort of caster. And it was really nice to jump into the iron world. But my work is very mixed media. It's not just iron. And it is demanding because of its community aspect, but also it's the labor. When you're hosting an iron pour, it's intense. And I have an iron pour March 20th if you want to come to Denver. So, yeah, a week and a half after I get back. So both things attract me. I love the idea of multiples. I make sure I pour at every pour, even if I don't know what it's for. And so I have a graveyard of cast components that I can look through sometimes and sort of invent some things with. They're often in my wheelhouse. Like I'm doing umbrellas or mop heads or whatever, but I'm not necessarily casting a piece because you have everybody working together to make your work. So there's a love of proximity to molten metal at that temperature too. A very hands-on sensibility to industrial processes that we are normally denied. I mean, iron casting 1960s was never in the artist's hands before the 1960s, and it has grown since then, and become quite global. And it's a calling card. I have a symposium that we're running over in Germany now every summer that is iron, because we went and built a furnace, because somebody said, come build a furnace and do iron here. How dare you do it everywhere else except here? It's my brother. I said, I'm not working with my family. You don't work with your family. But he's persuasive, and we did go. And there is a furnace over there, and you should come over to Germany sometime for some metal. Yeah. And then there's one more. Yeah.
So previously in like some of your earlier works, you directly used audio in a couple of pieces, and then you later used like your cassette tapes, and then later you used speakers and stuff like that in a lot of your work. I'm wondering how important is the audio to any of your performance, and how important is audio to that, or is that just a coincidence throughout your work that you keep like circling around?
Yeah, I think what I think about when I think about sound in space, even outdoor spaces, it defines space, and I think that's an important component to the use of sound. It really helps create negative space becomes space, and that's the thing with installation, right? Everything. Attention to detail on some level is really attuned. I may have sort of unfinished rusty metal, but I'm looking past that. I'm looking at other things. Negative space is one of them. So yeah, that can be the audio interest for me. But it's also the materiality that audio is, the medium that we use to communicate, right? And that becomes a tactile, multiple we, and that is really nice about working on it. And then if you read Overstory, it's all about.
So I was curious how you approach including different mediums within your sculpture. So for instance, with like the pinhole camera photos, like how do you approach incorporating those?
So when I'm teaching at the Burnham College of Art, I have access to a black and white darkroom, and I just got an armored with pinhole cameras the first year I taught there, and then I tend to go whole hog into something for a little while. I haven't taken pinhole photos in a while since, but I think I resolved it. But I was mimicking, I was using a lot of footage from that time in Ireland, but I was mimicking daisies growing out of walls in castles and whatever in Ireland, so west coast of Ireland again. And that inspired the flora, like sewing lace onto them and florist wire back into the wall. And I actually had a fan on them in the galleries where they would move as well, like they're in that sort of natural setting, usually activated by the viewer approaching something. So I like the, nostalgia is maybe in there for me when it comes to imagery, and a lot of it is with the pinhole camera in particular, you're magnifying something miniature up close, and it plays in perspective a little bit, and I think that can be something that is important in my work in general. That helps. So I'm not limited to any one material, for sure. Lindsay, are we? Yes.
Well, we are at time, but I do have a question.
Oh.
So if anyone can be, sorry. I'm just thinking of our students who are about to embark on figuring out their own studio spaces, and it's, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your studio practice, and if you start with research or start with play or a combination of both, and also what your studio looks like to be able to is everything in crates? Like, how do you know where things are, and is it just a huge warehouse? Just like a little snippet.
Yeah,
of that's like,
I think the transition from school to physical space outdoors is hard, but just don't let yourself not have something. As a sculptor, an angle grinder is brilliant because you can, do an awful lot with an angle grinder. You don't need to have, a huge amount of other things if you have an angle grinder. It does a lot. And also, you can work cold with things too. My studio space is something I'm going to work on in the fall sabbatical, because I had to downsize from a 1,000 square foot studio to a 2-car garage. So it's floor to ceiling towered boxes, not crates, but I love cardboard boxes. And I sort of know what's in there. It doesn't mean it's easy to reach for, but I do find it. Sometimes things seem invisible and have been missed. But, I'm good at tucking things away. Space thing. But so they're tall avenues right now, but I fabricate at a school studio too. And I tend to use 5 minutes if you give me 5 minutes, and I tend to use 2 weeks if you give me 2 weeks. Yeah. So I, like my husband needs 5 days to get ready to do 5 minutes work. Whereas it's like, so people are very different about how they practice. And I think that, yeah. I schedule things, so I schedule 5 minutes, I schedule whatever. I don't know if that helps. That's just an insight into here, it doesn't necessarily help. All of you have met me now, and you're all potentially Arncasters, but come to Denver. If you're in Denver, look me up, come visit the studio.
You come back and do an iron pour here?
Yeah, if no, will have me. Yeah. So you've got a great school here and good faculty. So that's winning the lotto so far. Just keep making work. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rian.